Hello, wine world. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on Sip Side Note, episode 5. Tonight, my guest is Heather from Craft and Cluster. She is from California. She is a wine photographer, and the purpose of tonight is to get to know her. I have been very drawn to her photos. It shows harvest. She does more with clients, with social media aspect, but what brought me to her profile to begin with on Instagram was her reels. We both are in a reels challenge right now, and she is crushing it. She has such a lovely personality that I just had to get to know her more. So, Heather, thank you so much for joining me today. And
Thank you so much.
tell me your story. Where did you begin? How did you start?
It's quite long and convoluted, but I'll try and make it more succinct. And thank you so much, by the way. This is really fun, and I always love talking to other wine people, and it's just so much fun. So my story, like I said, it's very long and convoluted. It's very involved. When I was graduated high school in 2007, I had the aspiration of becoming a photojournalist. And I went to community college just to, test out the waters and see if that's really what I wanted to do. As it turns out, I didn't want to do that. About like a year into college, I was like, this is maybe not for me. And so my sister was going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo at the time, which is a school here on the Central Coast of California. And I went up to visit her. It's just a beautiful, amazing area. And she was like, you need to figure your shit out. You need to get it together. Here's a course catalog, pick a new major, figure out what you want to do with your life. I was like, okay. And so I was flipping through the catalog and got to the very, very back, and it said wine and viticulture. And I was like, you can do that? It's like a major. It's a real thing that you can do. I thought you had to be, I was so naive. I thought you had to be born into winemaking in order to become a winemaker. I don't know why I had this hyper romantic view of it.
It must be very common because just to interrupt quickly, it's just you have the resources with California, so I can see it being more available as a major there than here on the East Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I think there's only about 5 universities in the country that really have a full dedicated wine and viticulture program. I believe Cornell is one of them, or maybe Purdue. I don't know. I don't remember. That was a long time ago that I was looking at colleges. But yeah, so I picked wine and viticulture as my major and started, learning more about the wine industry and learning more. I knew nothing about wine. Just that my parents and my dad liked to drink wine, and and he would order wine at dinner, and that was the extent of it. And so I started learning more, and I was like, okay, well, I'm taking all these classes, but I need to actually get into the wine industry. So I turned 21 and started looking for tasting room jobs, because I was like, oh, I think that would be a safe place to get in on the ground floor and really learn.
Right.
And I was searching and searching and searching. I applied to, I think, 5 or 7 wineries up in the San Luis Obispo area. And I had a couple of interviews, and, and they all said the same thing. You don't have any experience. You don't know anything about wine. So we just, we're not looking for somebody who knows nothing about wine right now. And I was like, okay, that's fair. But also that sucks.
Right. How are you going to start?
Yeah. Super lame. And so then I ended up applying, I was at midnight. I was looking at Craigslist, and I found a wine job that was down in Santa Barbara wine country, which is where I live now. And it was for a winery called Foxen, which I came to learn was actually a very well-known winery and very highly respected winery. And they were searching for a tasting room associate. And I, sent in my resume and got a call back, and they brought me in for an interview, and we got through the whole interview process. And the manager at the time was like, okay, we're still looking, so we'll let you know, but you don't have any wine experience. So, and I lost it. And I was like, how the fuck am I supposed to get experience if no one will hire me to give me experience? And she was like, you know what? You're right. And then ended up hiring me.
I'm glad. That is
Rashness.
great story. I mean, but you know what? It's so true. I would be frustrated too. I don't know if I'd have the balls to even do that, but I'm glad you did.
It was sort of just, I was at the end of my tether, and I had left. I was working at the time, I had been working for a veterinarian's office as a vet tech.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I need to get a new job. So I like quit that job. And so I had like 1 week left working for them. And I was like, I need to find a job like immediately. And guys, sorry, my dogs are over there. So they always get sassy in the middle of these live conversations. Anyway, so I got that job, and it was the best possible winery I could have started at. They taught me everything I knew, and I worked for them for about 2.5 years in the tasting room, and then I also worked in the winery. In 2012, I did my very first harvest with them.
That's great.
And then this whole time I was going to school, and so I ended up transferring to Oregon State University in the Willamette Valley. It's like right in the middle, the Willamette Valley. And so I had to move up there to finish my degree and live there for a couple of years. And I just missed it so much, missed San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara so much that once I graduated, my husband and I moved back, and I started working for Foxen again for another couple of years.
Like a full circle.
Yeah, exactly. They really they took me under their wing and really made me feel welcome and taught me so much. And they're just kind, amazing people. I can't praise them enough. Wonderful winery, wonderful people.
So how does the photography come in?
Yes, as I said, long and convoluted. So my degree is actually in horticulture. So it's viticulture and enology. My focus was on being a vineyard manager. And so I was working for Foxen, and they're a smaller winery. And they just ran out of things for me to do. They were like, we don't have a place for you in the vineyard. They do all their own farming, but they don't, they have like, I think maybe 25 acres of their own grapes. And then they purchase the rest of their grapes. They purchase from other vineyards. And I was like, well, I need to grow. And I felt like a big fish in a small pond. And so they were very gracious, and they recommended that I look into working with Coastal Vineyard Care, which is a vineyard management company here in Santa Barbara wine country. And they, I interviewed with them, and they were like, okay, well, we need you to do all of these things. We need you to be pest management or pest scouting rather, tech, vit tech. So I would go out to like weather stations and download the weather station data and compile that into powdery mildew reports so that the pest control department could make their recommendations for sprays if we needed to do sprays and things like that. And then also grape buying. And then they were like, okay, so we want you to split your time into thirds for those 3 things. And then the last like 0.01% of your time, could you start like a social media page for us? And I was like, okay, that sounds like fun, whatever. And I knew that I wanted the photos to be high quality. I didn't want to use stock photos. I wanted them to be original. Right. And so I was like, guys, guess it's time to pick up my camera again after 10 years.
Wow.
I picked up my camera, and so I would take it out with me into the field. Anytime I was downloading weather station data, or if I was pest scouting, just anytime I was out in the vineyard, I would bring my camera with me and I would just capture photos. And I just started loving it so much, and sort of making a name for myself, she says so humbly, that people started asking if I could photograph them for, they would be interviewed by wine writers and wine bloggers. And so they'd be like, oh, I don't have any up-to-date headshots. Could you photograph me? And so I just started doing that for fun, just for my friends. And I really, really enjoyed it. So much so that I eventually left Coastal Vineyard Care and started Craft and Cluster. So again, the long story of how this came to be.
No, it's very interesting. So your business name, Craft and Cluster, do you want to go a little bit into that as well?
Yeah, it started out as sort of a stupid Instagram my husband and I started. He is really interested in craft beer, and he worked for a couple breweries while we were up in Oregon, and now he works for a beer distributor. And so we wanted to start a silly, fun Instagram where we would just share whatever wine and beer we were drinking, and we were trying to come up with a name, like a username that would encapsulate that. So something that highlighted both like craft beer and then also wine. And we had come up with like Bricks and Barrel at one point, and we're like, oh, this is the best name. And then we looked it up, and there's a wine shop, I think up north somewhere, I think in Santa Rosa, who they already, they're very successful and they're wonderful people as well. And so we're like, okay, we can't use that. And so we started Craft and Cluster. And so then once, I started this business, it just made sense for me to kind of take that and make that my business rather than, because we weren't really posting to it anyways. We weren't very dedicated to that whole Instagram.
That's amazing. I really enjoy your story. I think, like I said, it was full circle. I really like that you said you brought your camera through the vines. You're on the go. So anything that inspired you, you just took a photo.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just that simple? Whatever inspires you, or you have a method to the madness?
Yes and no. It started out that it was very much just me like having my camera on me, and just, the purpose of the Coastal Vineyard Care Instagram was education. And so anytime I would see an opportunity to educate on what we were doing, the practices that we were doing, because not a lot of people really know what a vineyard management company does. Yeah. And so, it was public outreach, PR basically, and then education. And so we weren't using the Instagram as a way to sell grapes or anything. It was purely just community. And so anytime I saw an opportunity to educate, I would just take a photo. And as you can like go back through the Coastal Vineyard Care Instagram, and you can see my progression of like the photos getting a little bit better and a little bit better. And so it started out just purely, that was the motivation, was like, right, have camera, I need to make a post, take picture of something educational, and then like write like a silly caption about it. And then as I started becoming a little bit more intentional, because I was like, oh, this is actually really fun. I wish that, I was looking back at some of the old photos, and I was like, man, I wish I had taken this photo this way instead. Or I wish I had done this instead. And so I was like, okay, well, next time I go out to that vineyard, I'll take the same photo, but I'll try and capture it the way that I imagine I want it to be captured. And so I started becoming a little bit more intentional. And so I started studying other photographers, other wine photographers that I know and love, and just looking at their work and being like, okay, what is it about their work that I love? What is drawing my eye to this? What if I were them, how would I improve it? How would I make it my own? And so it was just a lot of, and I think this is true for anything, like anything you're trying to learn, is you study and study and study, and then you figure out a way to make it yours. And that was really the impetus behind that. So there is a bit of a method to my madness now that I've been doing this for a few years. And so now my motivations are, what are the goals of my client that I'm capturing the image for? How can I make this image valuable? So how can I help my client get a return on their investment with me? And then how can I tell a bigger story? How can I tell the larger story behind this image? And then, of course, how is this image going to impact their audience? How is it going to be valuable? What about this image is going to make their audience care about it and care about them as a company. And so, so I have all these things in my head. And then of course now, I also want to make it pretty and make it look cool and all that. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, I think that's great. I think for the style of photos that you've taken, I was most drawn to your tip that you shared and your reel with adding the hands. I mean, such a simple concept, yet it captivated me. I was like, wow, it really did bring motion and brought some life to it. It wasn't just still photo anymore. It was, wow, no, this was crafted with someone's hands. Maybe these are the hands that actually crafted that wine. It brought me deeper into the story of the photo. And that alone, plus I was really captivated that you do nighttime harvest photos.
Yeah.
The one photo where it is mostly dark in the vineyard, but they're taking the clusters and dumping it, and it's just smoke, like, just from being cold, most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, that really got me. I was like, wow, like the sacrifice that everyone has to wake up super early, be in the cold for hours, harvesting. I mean, I would be so lucky to do a harvest volunteer one year, but it's just so nice that you get to capture that. And I'm sure your clients get to look back and say, oh man, I know what I was doing in that moment. And it's memories for them, but it really captures the story of the wines that they're making and brings me closer to purchasing that wine and giving it a taste myself. And, even going forward, it's what you're doing for these clients is you're kind of creating like a lookbook where, this is what happened during this harvest, or this portrait taken, captures them, being proud of their wines. And, like I said, I'm really admirable of your work, and I'm just so excited to see the photos that you'll be taking and sharing in the next few weeks, if not months.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, that's my goal too, is, I sort of my elevator pitch for my business is that I help wineries tell the true story of how they get their wine into the hands of their fans. And so I feel like if I'm not doing that, if I'm not showing those behind the scenes, I'm not doing my job right. And I think that's what I mean, as someone I've worked in the cellar, I've worked in the vineyard and all that. So I know I've seen it. I know what it takes to bring wine to the table. And I would say the vast majority of, consumers don't know, they don't understand what it takes, just how hard winemakers and vineyard managers and the vineyard crews and everyone, just how hard they work and just how many hands actually touch. I mean, talking about hands, I like, if you see my Instagram, you know that I love hands. I love photographing them. I think they're very beautiful. They're beautiful things. And just how many hands it takes to bring, to go from soil to grape to glass. It's so involved. I mean, I think on average, they say about 30 pairs of hands have touched the grapes that get you into the wine, and so being able to show that and share that with consumers is really important, not only to me, but also to my winery clients, because it helps give consumers a level of empathy, I think, for the product. They're no longer just purchasing a bottle of Pinot Noir. They're purchasing a bottle of Pinot Noir that was handcrafted by these people, and they're getting to know these people and their hands, and they're understanding that it's not, they're understanding why the wine is priced the way it is, which I think is another conversation, is that, and often a conversation is, how is this wine, this wine over here $50, whereas this wine over here is, $15. And it's like, well,
the numbers speak volumes.
Yeah.
This is, more handcrafted. This is more hard work versus the mass produced.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, so it's my job. I feel it's my mission to make sure that the consumers really understand what they're sipping. It's no longer just wine. It's a story. These are people's livelihoods, and these people have poured their literal blood, sweat, and tears into making this.
Right.
And so I could go on and on about it.
No, I love it because, as a consumer and an educator, it's so nice to see those photos. I was not educated with college courses with a major per se. It's more self-study with my certification, but just like I said, you're bringing it to life, and you're really giving us those behind the scenes that we don't see. I think now with social media, we're lucky to see that vineyards and wineries are doing those behind the scenes with harvest, and I am drawn to them. I'm like, I want to see this. I want to see this. So especially this time of year.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask a few more questions. Heather, what is your favorite wine?
Oh my gosh, it's like choosing your favorite child. I love so many. I'm very I'm an equal opportunity wine drinker. I will. I think it really depends on the time of year, and it also depends on what I'm eating. But I do have this long-term love affair with Gruner Veltliner.
Ooh, good one.
It's such a bright and it's so refreshing, but it's also like, I feel like some acid bomb wines tend to be a little like one-dimensional. Whereas most Gruner Veltliners I've enjoyed have been just so complex, and there's just so much to them that I've been really enjoying them. And so that's usually what I reach for if I have the choice.
Particular region in mind that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, of course, any Gruner Veltliner from Austria is really wonderful, but from Santa Rita Hills in particular, which is it's the Santa Ynez Valley within Santa Barbara wine country. Gruner Veltliner from the Santa Rita Hills is so delicious. It's so good. The soils here in that area that whole area used to be underwater. And so it's all, diatomaceous earth. There's lots very rich and so you get this really kind of minerally quality to it. And then of course the climate itself is very cool. And so it's bright and acidic, but as I said, very complex. And depending on what part of Santa Rita Hills you're getting the fruit from, they can be vastly different. Like you can have such a diverse spectrum of Gruner Veltliner just within the Santa Rita Hills itself. So that's probably one of my favorite regions. And then overall, I think maybe my first love was Cabernet Franc. Yeah. And again, I tend to lean more towards cooler climate Cabernet Francs. Yeah, they just, again, have a little bit more complexity, and they're just more acid driven, and I really enjoy that. So, talking about Foxen, that was my first love, was the Tinnaquaque Vineyard Cabernet Franc, which is their dry farmed vineyard. And it's older vines. I hate saying older vines because that vineyard was planted in 1989, which is when I was born. So, but they're starting to put old vines on the bottles, which is giving me a little bit of a complex. So that wine, because those vines are dry farmed, they're just really deep and rich and just concentrated. But then it's in this Santa Maria Valley, which again, Santa Barbara County Santa Maria Valley is considered a cooler climate, and has a little bit of an ocean influence, and the soils are pretty sandy there. And so it's just it has that great depth and acidity as well. And it's like, that's the whole package. I just love it so much. It reminds me quite a lot of like Chinon. I always say that wrong, but Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley.
And I love it from there too. So that was a great comparison, because I now know what you're speaking of a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like you're like something that could be great with it's great with tacos. It's great with with pasta. I mean, I've had it. I mean, it's steak. Like, yeah, I love the Foxen. If you can ever get your hands on a Foxen Tinaquac Cabernet Franc, it's like perfect. So delicious. So yeah,
divine. Absolutely. I'm going to end our talk with this one question. What advice do you give to aspiring wine photographers?
I would say, remember why you are capturing those images. Because I mean, I think anyone can learn photography, and you can learn how to show emotion and tell a story. But I think we always need to keep in mind why we're capturing an image. And really like think about your first time getting in the wine industry, I guess, is kind of a big thing, is remember, what are the things that would fascinate you? What are the things that would captivate you as like a brand new wine drinker? What are the things that would impress upon you kind of the importance of the wine industry, and then capture the image. So take time, be observant, and be patient as well. I mean, that image that you were talking about earlier, I literally was like crouched, at the end of a row, watching the harvest crew picking as fast as they can. And just for like about 10 minutes, I was sitting there waiting, because I knew that they kept walking in front of the light. And I was like, I know that they're going to dump it at some point, and one of them's going to dump it just right, and it's going to hit just right, and that was in the Santa Rita Hills. So the Santa Rita Hills is known for being kind of foggy. So that's what that kind of like mist that you were seeing. And so I was just waiting, and it's a lot of it is just you know what you want to capture, but you just have to wait for that right moment to happen and then capture it. I would say just be patient, I guess, is the best advice I can give to any photographer. Is be patient.
I love it. I love that you're passionate about your brand and what you're showing us consumers. Again, I'm in awe of your work. It is beautiful, and I am looking forward to what's to be shared in the near future. Heather, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight on my SIP Side Note. I hope you had a nice time. You gave some great advice. You had a great story, and I have to check out Foxen now.
Yes.
But how can we contact you outside of, today's show?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to reach me is Instagram. That's where I keep the most up to date. So at Craft and Cluster is my Instagram handle. And then beyond that, I mean, you can always DM me. I'm working on my boundaries, but I tend to respond to DMs pretty quickly. That's the best place to reach me. Of course, you can always go to my website, craftandcluster.com. I'm working on updating that right now, but Instagram's the best place for most up to date.
Wonderful. So again, thank you so much. I'm sure my followers and your followers will be viewing this with the replay and contacting you if they have any further questions. So stick around, and I will help you with what I mentioned earlier.
Yes, thank you.
So have a good night, everyone, and cheers.
Cheers.